The midterm elections now less than 8 days away, and control of the U.S. House and Senate is up for grabs. An ominous number for Democrats. 43% of Americans say their finances are now worse than when President Biden was elected. That's according to Bankrate. Here to discuss that is Bankrate Senior Economic Analyst Mark Hamrick. Mark, good to see you, sir. Let's dive inside that number a bit. How does it break down among demographics, generations, and political parties?
Well, good to see you as well. Generally speaking, younger Americans, and we weren't just surveying voters here, we're really surveying across the landscape of the country. Younger Americans tended to be either faring better from their own statements, and certainly Democrats were saying that they thought they were faring better than the Republicans were willing to say. So it is quite, I think, interesting here that the polarization that we've seen for a number of years now in our country is representing itself in the way that people are assessing their own personal financial plights.
Now, Mark, I want to ask you about this one statistic here. 69% place at least a moderate amount of blame on President Biden for their financial situation. And keep in mind, he came in the middle of a pandemic, and then obviously you had Russia and Ukraine as well. But people seem to put the blame obviously more squarely on the president's shoulders. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'd say a couple of things about that, Rachelle, and it's great to see you again as well. First of all, I think that, there is this notion of an all-powerful president that many people have come to espouse, whether it's accurate or not. And there is the old saying that I believe it was Harry Truman put into the public's mindset, which was the buck stops here. And so we could probably talk for hours about the messaging that this administration has tried to employ with respect to the economy. But many Americans, I do think, are perhaps fixated to some degree on the presidency. And frankly, some lack the nuanced understanding of government and the economy to be able to sort of slice and dice where the blame might actually be cast.
The number we put up and you discussed earlier was really my big takeaway from your survey, that 56% of younger voters versus the 30 we see there. Why that matters is because who votes more, and why does that matter? What are the implications for the midterms for Democrats?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good implication for them because, the thought has been that the turnout in this election will not be sufficient to give Democrats the kind of support that they saw in 2020. And as you say, younger voters have tended to be more disengaged in recent years than older voters. So obviously, just like prognosticators do when they're anticipating the outcome of a big sports contest, we actually got to get through this election to see how it turns out. But some of the other survey information outside of the survey work that we do, I've seen indicates that, broadly speaking, Republicans are seen as perhaps being more credible with respect to management of the economy than Democrats are, whereas the Democrats are seen sort of playing strong hands on issues like abortion and the student loan forbearance issue. And, then the question is that enough for them to prevail in the sense of holding on to the House and at least holding on to that tie in the Senate? And I would say that the prospects for that are, for them, not good.
And even looking ahead over the next 2 years, about 1 in 3 people expect their finances to be worse. When you look at what actually is making up the financial picture that they're talking about, what is it that they're honing in on with this?
Well, we did not question them in this survey about that. But as you know, we survey Americans all the time at Bankrate. And so between this survey, other surveys we've done, we know, for example, economically, statistically, that the excess savings that Americans had amassed during the early year or so of the pandemic, that excess savings is certainly dwindling, and inflation is stealing that cash as well as their purchasing power. Elsewhere, of course, inflation broadly is clearly the number one issue on consumer minds. And for others, I would say that, in some ways, this situation has come for everybody in one form or the other, including those who are wealthy, who, by the way, in this survey, those with household incomes of more than 250,000 or more, we really saw a strong showing on their part here saying that their finances were better off. Yet, they would be the ones who would tend to have lost the most wealth, even on a percentage basis per household, because they were more exposed to the stock market during this bear market that we've seen. So I think there's fear. I think there is concern about the persistence and high level of inflation, not to mention the fact that, economists broadly, as well as many corporate executives, are saying that the risk of recession are quite high getting into 2023.
Well, really fascinating look at the psyche of voters and their finances heading into midterms. Mark Hamrick, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.